What if there's a memory not stored in your brain but buried deep in your soul? And what if you suddenly remembered it? Are you sure you're living in alignment with your true nature? Or are you just playing out a role written for you by beliefs that were never yours to begin with? And if there were a technique that could decode this memory, why is it that almost no one ever teaches it? Not because it doesn't work, but because it works too well. So well that the systems built on control are terrified of it. They don't want you to remember, because an awakened soul is more dangerous than an entire army asleep. For thousands of years, there existed a technique that was fiercely protected. Not because it destroys, but because it liberates. This technique doesn't teach you anything new. It doesn't offer knowledge. It simply lifts the dust that has buried your truest self. You don't need more information. You need to remember. And the first thing you must remember is this: you are not what you were taught to be. Carl Jung, the legendary psychoanalyst, once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." He understood that within each human being lies a storehouse of ancient memory, not from personal experience, but from a deeper realm he called the collective unconscious. There, your soul still remembers everything: who you once were, what you once believed, the powers you once carried, and the reason you came here. But this society doesn't want you accessing that memory. Instead, it builds systems designed to train your ego, to help you forget your essence, and replace it with roles, achievements, and obedience. From an early age, you were taught to become someone: a good citizen, a model student, an efficient worker, but never yourself. The memory of the soul isn't written on paper. It's etched in vibration, a level of awareness the mind can't decode, but the heart can feel. And here's the truth: generations have tried to keep hidden. There is a technique, not found in textbooks, not on the shelves of self-help bookstores, a technique that cannot be commercialized, yet has the power to shake the foundations of your entire reality. So why was it forbidden? Because if you remember who you truly are, you can no longer be manipulated. You will no longer live out of fear, but from truth. And no system of control can survive a soul that has remembered itself. That's why, in ancient civilizations, this technique was only passed on to those who were truly ready, not because they were special, but because they had the courage to face every truth. The truth about themselves, their past, and the darkness that lives within. This journey won't give you a checklist or a how-to guide. Instead, it will take you into a deep inner experience, where your own awareness begins to recall what your soul has always known. No dogma, no doctrine, no one to believe in, just your presence, with an open heart and a silent mind. In the next few minutes, we will travel back in time, tracing the footprints of this technique across ancient cultures. From Egypt to India, from Greece to China, each one left clues, encoded in symbols, rituals, and myths. And soon, you'll begin to see. This technique isn't foreign. It is you, before the forgetting began. If something inside you just stirred, if this doesn't feel like a video but a signal, then subscribe now. Not for the algorithm, but because your journey to remembering who you truly are has already begun. Have you ever wondered why ancient stories, distant myths, and lost legends have such an oddly powerful pull on your soul? It's not because they're magical. It's because they speak the truth, but truth hidden beneath symbols. There's an old saying whispered in the mystery schools of antiquity. Every myth holds a truth, but that truth is encoded, not in words, but in rituals, in images, in sound, and in a silence deep enough for the soul to finally listen. The technique to awaken the memory of the soul is not a modern invention. It doesn't belong to any one religion or philosophy. It has always existed, like an underground river flowing silently beneath human history. But it does not appear to everyone, only to those truly ready. Only then can they recognize it. In what seems like scattered fragments, hidden in plain sight, you won't find it in textbooks. It's hidden in Egyptian pyramids, in Greek hymns, in Indian meditations, and in the Taoist principle of Wu Wei. We will now follow these fragments, like someone piecing together the forgotten memory of their own soul. In ancient Egypt, people didn't just worship gods. They studied how to die, not physically, but consciously. At the purest, the houses of life, priests would lead initiates into sacred rituals, where the body remained still for hours. As consciousness was guided through invisible doorways, into a symbolic death, and then back again, carrying memories that didn't belong to this world. No one needed to explain anything to them afterward. They had become someone new, not because they learned something, but because they remembered something they had never truly lost. In ancient Greece, the technique echoed through the Orphic hymns, songs of the soul, trapped temporarily in the body, awaiting a sacred rite to open the door back to its source. In mystery schools, the initiate was taught, you don't have a soul. You are a soul carrying a body. Through sound, breath, and trance, they were led to a space beyond names and thoughts, to a pure resonance between the self and the sacred. Carl Jung later called this process individuation, the union of the personal self with the immortal soul. Further east, in ancient India, there was a core concept, smarana, the sacred act of remembering. The rishis, the seers of the inner eye, didn't teach through philosophy. They lived in silence because they understood. You don't need to add anything. You only need to remove what is not truly you. That's why they meditated. That's why they chanted O-M. That's why they revered the lotus, a symbol that speaks to depths where words collapse. In ancient China, mystery wasn't in words. It was in the Tao. Lao Tzu didn't describe the Tao. He said, the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. He didn't teach by explaining. He guided through harmony with nature's flow, a principle called Wu Wei, non-interference, non-force, non-doing. And within that stillness, the memory of the soul rises naturally, like a spring pushing up through stone. In his final years, Carl Jung became deeply fascinated by the Tao. He realized, awakening doesn't come from effort, but from releasing every mask you've ever worn. And here lies a truth few ever notice. All of these civilizations left behind clues, but not in the form of instruction manuals. They left symbols, the flame, the lotus, the eye, the pyramid, the circle, the tree of life. Not mere religious décoration, but resonant gateways, designed to awaken layers of memory that lie beneath language. Jung believed that symbols are the soul's original language, not meant to be understood, but to activate. A true symbol doesn't give you information. It opens up an experience. And only when you live through that experience do you truly begin to remember who you are. By now, you may feel something moving inside you. A strange but familiar vibration. A quiet question rising from within. Why did I ever forget this? And that question leads us to the next chapter. If this technique once existed, if it was once sacred, if it once saved lives, then what happened? Who took it from humanity's hands? Who made it forbidden? And why has remembering yourself become so dangerous? Next, we enter the age of deliberate forgetting, where souls were silenced, memories overwritten with false beliefs, and the sacred technique was broken, fragmented, and turned into something forbidden. If this technique once existed, once was sacred, once shook the very soul of humanity, then what happened? Why is it that today, when people hear the word awakening, they smirk or look away? Why have sacred symbols been shoved into fairy tales, dismissed as superstition, or twisted into tools for mass entertainment? The answer is simple and cold, not because it was false, but because it no longer served those in control. There was a period stretching across centuries when truth wasn't forgotten naturally, it was systematically erased. Crusades, inquisitions, the rise of exclusive religious systems, all aimed at one goal: to replace direct experience with controlled belief. The technique that awakened the soul could not be owned. It could not be packaged into dogma or monopolized, and so it was declared dangerous. Instead of letting you feel the sacred within yourself, they placed something between you and your soul: a doctrine, a system, an institution, where you were no longer allowed to ask, "Who am I?" but only permitted to accept, "You are a believer, a sinner, a soul in need of salvation." Truth was replaced with roles. Living experience was replaced with empty ritual. Carl Jung called this era a time of collective psychological darkness. He said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." In that time, if you dreamed of inner light, if you heard a calling from within, if you spoke of a technique not found in scripture or sanctified halls, you were labeled a heretic, a witch, a blasphemer, a lost soul, not because you were wrong, but because you were too close to what they were hiding. The ancient techniques never disappeared. They were broken apart, hollowed out, and repackaged into safe forms. A ritual without soul, a symbol without resonance, a prayer without connection. The sacred was reduced to surface. The memory of the soul was overwritten with externally imposed belief systems, and anyone who strayed from them was punished, erased, or cast out of history. But what's the most terrifying part? It's not the ones in power. It's when you forget that you once knew, when you no longer see yourself as an immortal soul, but as a job title, a gender, a diploma, a label. When you wear the mask, not because someone forced you to, but because you were taught to believe. The mask is you. And this is where Jung helps us confront what no one wants to face: the shadow, the darkness within each human being. Shadow isn't evil. It's the part of truth we've rejected, because it's too painful, too unfamiliar, too inconsistent with the role we've been told to play. To remember your soul, you must face your shadow, not to destroy it, but to integrate it, to make it part of you. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." So this technique is not just light. It demands that you face what you've buried the longest. And that's why it's been called dangerous. Not because it harms, but because it demands truth. And truth is what both power systems and the ego fear the most. Now, we will no longer speak in theory. We begin the technique itself. The 3 essential phases designed to reawaken the sacred resonance your soul has always carried. You won't be learning something new. You will begin to remember. You cannot remember your true soul while you're still living inside a version of yourself that was never really you. And that's where the real journey begins. Not in a monastery, not in a book, but inside your own mind. The first step of this technique may also be the hardest: deprogramming the false self. It doesn't ask you to destroy yourself. It asks you to observe her so deeply that what isn't true simply falls away. From a very young age, you were programmed, not by evil people, but by those who were programmed themselves and didn't know it. You were taught, this is how you should think, this is how you should feel, this is what you should fear, this is how a good person should live. And you absorbed all of it. Because as a child, you had no filter of awareness. You were wide open, you took it all in, and you built your first ego, not from truth, but from the fear of rejection. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because in order to accept yourself, you must first see everything that is not you." This technique doesn't tell you to fight the ego. It teaches you to observe it, the way a scientist watches a chemical reaction. Each time you think, "I'm not good enough," ask yourself, where did that voice come from? Is it even mine? Or was I trained to believe it? Every time you fear being abandoned, listen closely. Who first taught you that love is conditional? Every time you feel anger, defensiveness, the urge to prove, the need to hide, pause, not to overcome your emotions, but to see who is actually speaking in your mind. This phase is like cleaning out a room full of old memories. You don't need to break down the walls. You just need light. You just need to recognize what isn't truly yours. And here's the miracle. What isn't you will naturally leave, if you're brave enough to see it clearly. This isn't an easy process, because the ego doesn't want to die. It will scream, convince you, without me, you'll be nothing. But the truth is, when the false self finally goes quiet, your true soul begins to speak. And you'll start to hear other voices, not the voice of fear, not the voice of society, but a quiet, honest voice you once heard as a child, now buried beneath years of noise. That voice belongs to your soul. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and it only becomes audible when every other sound has been silenced by awareness. Carl Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You can't steer a life that's being lived from programmed memories, but you can awaken, not through force, but through the gentle light of honest observation. The first practice of this phase is simple but powerful. 1. Each day, spend a few minutes alone. No music, no screens. 2. Just listen to the stream of thoughts passing through your mind. 3. With each thought, ask, is this really my voice? Did I choose to believe this? Or was I taught to believe it? Don't try to push anything away. Just observe. Because awareness is the most powerful cleanser there is. You're not becoming someone new. You're returning to who you were before you were programmed. And when the first mask begins to crack, a new space opens, a new vibration lighter, arises, and you begin to feel it. I'm remembering myself. And when the silence inside becomes clear enough, something strange begins to happen. You no longer hear with your ears or feel with your heart. Another sense awakens, one with no name, no shape, only certainty, deep, still, as if you're remembering something that was never spoken, but has always been there. If something inside you, right now, makes you want to shut off every noise, just to hear that silent truth, share this video, not to make someone agree with you, but because someone, somewhere, might be waiting for a reason to return to themselves, too. When the noise of the ego begins to quiet, when you're no longer swept away by every thought, every emotion, every role, a space inside begins to open. And in that space, a new sensation begins to stir. Not sight, not sound, not the sixth sense, as seen in movies, but a primordial knowing, one that's always been there, only buried beneath too many voices from the outside. Carl Jung believed that the soul was not a religious belief. The soul is the deepest archetype of the human being, the foundation of truth itself. And the thing that connects us to that soul cannot be learned, it can only be awakened. This inner sense doesn't use words. It doesn't ask, is this right? It knows what is right. The moment it arrives, it sounds like this. This is me. This is true. And I don't need to prove it. No logic. No evidence. Just a deep certainty, like an echo returning from far away. You don't awaken it through force. You tune yourself to its frequency, so you can hear it, like tuning an old radio. As the static fades, the signal becomes clear, little by little. There are 3 ancient ways to awaken this soul sense. 1. Conscious breathing. Breath is the bridge between body and awareness. Every ancient tradition is grounded in breath, not as a survival mechanism, but as a sacred doorway. Inhale, return to yourself. Exhale. Release what is not you. You don't need to change your breath. Just be fully aware of each one. Carl Jung wrote, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And conscious breathing is the gentlest way to walk through that pain, without running from it. 2. Intentional imagery. This is not daydreaming. It's an ancient visualization practice, where the mind doesn't create something new, but activates symbols already alive within the unconscious. When you close your eyes and see a flame, a lotus, a mirror, a doorway, a star, that's not imagination. That's the language of your soul speaking back to you. Jung believed that symbols aren't just tools. They are living realities, living images that connect you to something beyond the ego. Symbols are the language of the soul. 3. Full presence in the body. Have you ever truly been in your body? Not controlling it, not judging it, but simply feeling every movement, every heartbeat, every breath, as if it were the first time. When you walk slowly and know that you're walking, when you lift a glass and feel your hand, the glass, and the water all at once. When you place a hand on your chest and sense the rhythm of your heartbeat, the pulse of life, with no urgency, that is the soul, beginning to inhabit the experience. These 3 practices, when brought together, open a kind of inner eye that doesn't belong to the body. You don't look, you perceive, and from that depth, a very specific feeling begins to emerge. You are no longer searching for the soul. You begin to feel like you are being found. From here, remembering is no longer a concept. It becomes a vibration, a frequency unique to you, unlike anyone else's. And it is this frequency that leads you into the deepest phase of the technique, resonating with the true name of your soul. But this moment, when the soul sense first awakens, is delicate. Leave a comment, even if it's just a single dot, because sometimes just saying, "I felt it," is enough to keep it from fading. When all the false layers begin to fall away, when the old roles no longer hold you captive, something very quiet starts to happen. You no longer ask, "Who am I?" You begin to feel what you are, not through reasoning, not through emotion, but through a living frequency invisible, yet so deep it cannot be mistaken. The true name of the soul has no syllables. It doesn't need to be spoken aloud. It only needs to be lived. And when you begin living in that frequency, everything untrue naturally falls silent. This is why the ancients didn't teach this technique with words. They transmitted it through state, because only in the right state can you resonate with the primordial vibration, where your soul knows itself again. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege doesn't arrive through striving. It comes when you stop, listen, and tune into the frequency that was always yours. It's like hearing a song your heart once remembered. From the very first notes, you don't need to analyze. You just know. You've been there before. The soul's true name is like that. You don't discover it. You return to it. And once you return, acquiesced but irreversibly, shift begins. You stop living by force. You begin living by harmony. No more feeling disconnected. No more proving, just one you, still, clear, and profoundly real. From here, life starts to feel like a piece of music. You don't control it. You move with its rhythm. You're no longer the thinker. You're the space in which thoughts pass. You no longer try to become awakened. You are awake, as naturally as breathing. And then, memories return, not from books or teachings, but from something far older. A familiarity with things you never learned. A kind of knowing no one taught you, but you never truly forgot. Not a fantasy, not delusion, but a deep connection to something timeless within you. Jung called this state expanded awareness, where the small self no longer holds the steering wheel, where the soul becomes the center of perception, where each moment becomes strangely vivid, where the line between the one practicing and the state itself completely disappears. You become the technique, and in that stillness, another door opens. Not a door leading to light, but into what you've long avoided, your inner darkness, because remembering who you are also means remembering what you once refused to face, the paths you didn't take, the parts of your soul you hid, the shadows you thought were the enemy. But this is not punishment. It is wholeness. You cannot become a complete soul if you bring only your light and abandon your shadow. You must embrace both, like the two wings of a door that leads you home. No more hiding, no more running, just you, with everything you once buried, standing before yourself. And in that very moment, something happens. Your soul settles. No more restlessness, no more questions, no more seeking, just full return. You can't learn this in a book. No one can teach it to you. You can only live it. And when you live in alignment with the frequency of your soul, life begins to rearrange itself, not according to a plan, but according to truth. You've passed through the three phases. You've dismantled the false self. You've awakened the sense of the soul. You've touched that true frequency, where soul memory begins to speak. But this is not the end. This is where the real journey begins. Because awakening isn't a flash of brilliance that vanishes like lightning. It's a rhythm of life, repeating itself in the smallest daily acts. A soul that remembers does not need to escape life. It doesn't retreat into the forest. It doesn't climb to distant peaks. It walks into the most chaotic places and still holds its frequency, because that is true awakening. Not abandoning the world, but living fully within it, without being consumed by it. There are 5 principles for living that help nourish the soul's frequency, even on the busiest, most chaotic, or painful days. 1. Practice intentional silence. This isn't about muting the world. It's about creating inner space that is uninvaded, even just 3 minutes a day. All that matters is that you fully show up. No goals, no expectations, no seeking. In that stillness, the soul's true name begins to whisper again. 2. Turn ordinary actions into sacred rituals. Washing your hands, brewing tea, putting on your shirt, looking someone in the eyes. Everything becomes sacred. If you do it from the center of your being, you don't need to do something big to live from the soul. You just need to fully inhabit each small moment. 3. Be selective about what you let in. What you watch, hear, read, and say all create vibrations. And those vibrations either cleanse your soul or cloud it. Food for the mind is no different than food for the body. Choose what makes you lighter, not heavier. 4. Speak less. Speak deeper. Don't echo what's already been said. Don't use words to cover up silence. Every word you speak can be an arrow or a doorway. Let your words be an echo of your soul, not an echo of your fear. 5. Live as if you already remember. Even if you're still learning to remember, walk as if you're carrying a sacred secret. Not to flaunt, but to keep the flame alive. The world doesn't need your perfection. It needs your truth. No one can do this for you. No course, no manual, no guru can replace your real presence with yourself. And then, one day, you'll realize you are no longer awakening. You are the awakening. You are no longer looking for light, because light has become the way you see. You no longer seek validation, because you're now living the exact frequency the universe encoded into you, long before you were born. That's what every sacred technique, every ancient ritual, every hidden symbol has pointed to. Not more knowledge, not belief, but returning. You don't need to learn more. You only need to remember, and you are beginning to remember. If this journey awakens something in you, even just a faint whisper, a vague feeling that says, I used to know this, hold on to it. Don't let it drift away like just another video. Give yourself a signal, a subscriber not to follow, but to commit to yourself. A commento, send a message to other souls also remembering. A share not for the content, but for the meaning. No one else needs to know you did it. Only you need to know. You chose to remember, because there is no revolution greater than a soul that has awakened. And if enough souls awaken, the world won't need to change through force. It will begin to resonate naturally. It all begins with one person who remembers who they are. Are you ready to live from that place? No answer needed. Your soul already knows. And if it's nodded quietly, then everything has already begun.